Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Catholic Experience. Technically, it's not officially an episode of the Catholic Experience. This is something a little extra that I'm doing. But thank you for joining me anyway. You're catching this definitely on Locals, and I want to thank you for being a part of my Locals community. I really appreciate you, whether you're paid or you're a free member. If you're catching this, if I decide to put this up on my podcast catalog, you'll be very lucky, and you're welcome. And I want to take this opportunity to encourage you to check me out on Locals. Join my Locals community, catholicexperience.locals.com. catholicexperience.locals.com. Check it out. You can join for free. You get some stuff there as a free member, and you get even more stuff, more perks, more extra content and stuff as a paid member for $5 a month. You're paying more than that on your futile hopes and dreams. You're paying much more than $5 a month for those dreams that you're chasing, that you're never going to catch. You're not going to buy your own country. You're never going to own your own island. Just give up those dreams. Take those $5 a month. Send them over to my way. catholicexperience.locals.com. And I thank you very much for your consideration. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about some words from the Pope that really frustrate me. He recently did an interview on 60 Minutes. It hasn't been released yet, but 60 Minutes has been releasing clips of it. And in this one clip, he talks about conservatives and kind of characterizes conservatives, which I don't like how he characterizes conservatives. And I wanted to address that, respond to it, tell you what I do and don't like about it. And I'm going to tell you what's good and correct about what he did say, because what he said wasn't completely off the mark. There was some truth to what he did say. I'll talk about that a little bit, and I'll talk about what I didn't like about what he said. You know, the Holy Father is not a bad theologian, but, and if you follow me on X at For the Queen BVM, or on Facebook at Catholic Adventurer, you'll know that I've said this again and again and again. He is a terrible communicator. He's not a terrible theologian. He's just a terrible communicator. And we get another example of that here. So without further ado, let's jump right into it.
There are conservative bishops in the United States that oppose your new efforts to revisit teachings and traditions. How do you address their criticism?
You used an adjective, conservative. That is, conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past.
So she begins by saying that there are Catholic bishops who oppose the Holy Father's efforts to revisit teachings and traditions. Stop. First of all, your first response should be, let's clarify what a teaching is, and especially what a tradition is. Because the way you, whoever this interviewer is, I don't know the woman's name, the way you understand tradition and the way we understand tradition is not the same thing. In the church, there are traditions that cannot change. It's called sacred tradition, the deposit of the faith. They cannot change. They will not ever change. Period. The end. No conversation necessary going forward on that. Now, if you want to talk about customs, that's something very different. And customs and teachings have nothing to do with each other. Say it again. Customs and teachings have nothing to do with one another. A custom is a custom. It's just a pattern of habits. That doesn't mean that they're worthless or useless. Of course not. But they are customs. We can call them traditions if we like, but they're customs. Has nothing to do with teaching. Dogmatically, canonically, doctrinally, has nothing to do with teachings. Now let's back up and go again.
Your new efforts to revisit teachings and traditions. How do you address their criticism?
You used an adjective, conservative. That is, conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude.
Okay, so conservatives cling to something and don't want to see beyond that. Yes and no. He's right about something, which I'll get to in a second, but he's wrong about something else. Let me just go back there.
Conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past.
Tradition has nothing to do, or it has very little to do with considering situations of the past. I think that's the Holy Father dummying it down for the interviewer. I really do think that's what he's doing. Please, God, don't let the Holy Father be this simple of mind. I really don't think that he is. It's one thing to consider situations of the past. That's not what tradition is. We're not talking about legal precedent. We're talking about sacred tradition, or we're talking about customs, and we're also talking about teaching. So when we think of situations in the past, doctrinally, there can be no changes, right? But sometimes let me tell you what does change. The world changes. The world becomes more disfigured. Situations develop and arise that you could never have imagined. 100 years ago, they could never have imagined transgenderism or trans theory or gender theory. They could never have imagined that 100 years ago. Now it's a thing. So how does the unchanging doctrine or teaching address or apply to these modern scenarios? What do we do with that now? Now the church has to talk about gender, which 100 years ago, hell, 50 years ago, was just obvious. The church never talked about gender before because it didn't have to. Now the church has to address a world that has gone crazy. So now the church, though not enough, talks about gender. So the point I'm trying to make is the teaching doesn't change, but the world does. The human order does. And it generally changes for the worse. So the church has to revisit these teachings, not to change the teachings, but to understand how these new situations apply to these old teachings. From the secular perspective, we are revisiting teachings in order to decide which ones can we change. Which ones would be prudent to change now that the world really hates them, those teachings? Which ones should we change? And how should we change them? What should they become? From the secular perspective, that's what they're seeing. Partly because the church, whether it's priests in the pulpit, usually not, or it's bishops, yeah, or the Holy Father, yeah, they are not explaining what we're actually doing. They're not explaining it to the world, and they're not explaining it to the church, the lowercase c church, people in the church. And so everyone's confused. And there are people, even on the right, who observe this, what we're doing in the church, or I should say what the church is doing, because I am not in the church. I am just a member of the church. They observe what the church is doing, and even they interpret it as determining which teachings can be changed and how we might do that, when that's actually not what's going on. Teachings do not change. They may evolve. They may evolve in a way that does not undermine or negate the truth. But I have to tell you, he's been Pope, 10 years? It's been 10 years of this discomfort, with the Pope saying things that confuse people or doing things that make people confused, or the magisterium is now doing things that are making people say, oh my God, are they going to change teaching? It's been about 10 years of that, right? I haven't really seen any evolution of teachings. I really haven't. Nothing really has changed. People say he changed the church's teaching on the death penalty. No, he didn't. He absolutely did not. So what you may see, let me talk about the past. What you would see in the past, way past, would be evolution of teaching. For instance, and this is a pretty extreme example, but it's a real one. What we know about the Trinity today is different from what the apostles and their immediate successors knew about the Trinity, because we've had 2,000 years to develop that theology, okay? Not to say that the apostles and their successors didn't know what the Trinity was, but they didn't know it as deeply as the church knows it today. You follow? That's a teaching that has developed. It hasn't changed. So over the course of 2,000 years, you have seen some development of theology, some development of teaching, that sort of thing. You have seen an evolution. And by evolution, I mean a development where the truth becomes deepened, not changed. In the 10 years, I think it's been 10 years since Francis' pontificate began, you haven't really seen that. You have not seen evolution of teaching. You have seen a reconsideration or a consideration of how existing teaching applies to modern scenarios. The reason why it can sometimes be shocking to us is because most people in the church do not know these teachings. They do. How many people in the church said the Holy Father changed the teaching on the death penalty? Do you know why they think that? Because they don't know what the church has always taught on the death penalty. Or it might be more correct to say they don't know the formula, they only know the outcome. So they see a 2, right? And they say, 1 + 1 = 2. They don't know that the actual formula is 1 × 10 - 5 + 2 - 10 plus this plus that. Yet they don't see that there are a lot of components to within the formula that make them arrive at the number 2. 1 + 2 - 1 - 5 + 4 + 1 = 2. Or actually, that might get us to 0. I'm going to replay this, and I think what I just did was I gave you a formula that gets us back to 0. I don't know. But anyway, you get the point. So most Catholics, with regard to the death penalty, they know the death penalty equals the number 2. Whatever the outcome is, the death penalty is okay as long as it's protecting the public, whatever. They don't know what actually goes into the formula that gives them the number 2. They don't understand fully the formula that leads us to the answer 2. So there's a lot of that. So a lot of people, even in the church, forget about outside the church, even in the church, there are a lot of people who are highly confused about what they're getting from the magisterium, from the Holy Father, whatever. But I can tell you there hasn't really been evolution of teaching. What you are seeing, though, is revisiting existing teaching to understand how they apply to modern scenarios. And even there, I don't think we've seen a lot of adjustment. But I haven't spent a lot of time, analyzing it, so I could be wrong about that. But I don't think we have seen a lot of adjustment. Like blessing people in gay marriages, in gay unions or irregular unions. That, I don't think, is a reapplication of existing teaching. I think that has always been true. What Fiducia Supplicans says, I think, has always been the truth. I think before Fiducia, priests could still bless individuals in gay unions or irregular relationships. In fact, I'm positive of that. That was true even before Fiducia. So you don't have a lot of revisiting, but anyway, you get the point. Let's go back to the videotape.
Conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
I have to agree with the Holy Father here, but before I explain that, let me say this. My trouble with this is the Holy Father makes it sound like it's a bad thing to cling to what was. We're Catholic. That's what we do. We cling to what was. That's what we do. You don't have to be a quote-unquote traditional Catholic to believe that. You just have to be Catholic. We cling to what was, because what was is always true. But what the Holy Father is saying here is limiting, because it's true, but it's limiting. It's true. Let me back up. It's limiting because I posted something about this on Twitter today, and Father Peter DeGanjic, who follows me on Twitter, and thank you, Father, for your support, he said something interesting. You could replace the word conservative with liberal in there, and the statement could still be true. That's true. Yeah, conservatives hold on to the past. That's what makes them conservatives, or us. That's what makes us conservatives. Conservatism is the brakes in the car. Liberalism, or I should say progressivism, is the gas pedal of the car. Don't get me started on progressivism. Most people watching this, you'll be shocked to know that progressivism is actually conservatism. The way we understand progressivism today is actually flawed. The word progressivism was hijacked by the liberals in around the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. It was hijacked by the liberals and basically redefined. But that's another story. If you want to know more about that, drop a comment and ask me. Conservatism is the brake pedal. It slows things down. Maybe it even stops things. Progressivism, or quote-unquote liberalism, is the gas pedal. It makes things move forward. Right? So yeah, as conservatives, we hold on to things. We're the brake pedal. Right? But that's not all that conservatism is. It is also true. It is also true that there are conservatives who take it too far, just as there are liberals who take that too far. There are conservatives who are so conservative, they will find the most fundamentalist theology imaginable to justify any ridiculous thing that the conservative wants to claim Catholicism is. Not all conservatives. I'm talking about the more extreme ones, the more extreme conservatives. I have seen extreme conservative Catholics get so desperate as to quote Protestant Reformationist theologians to say, this is what we believe as Catholics. Okay. And you know, the joke there is there's such fake theologians, these wild conservatives, they're faux theologians, but they think they're the real things. They're so fake, they don't even realize they just quoted a Protestant theologian and or a Protestant Reformationist theologian. Okay, but that's what the church believes. Okay, whatever you say. That is extreme conservatism in the church, and it exists, and it's a problem, and that's really what the Holy Father is talking about. But that is not what conservatism is. But what the Holy Father said is that that's what conservatism is. Wrong. No, it is not. No, it is not. What conservatism is adherence to the truth that was true before we heard about it. It was true whether or not we knew about it, and it will be true from now until the end of time and beyond. That's conservatism. Liberalism, or true progressivism, does not abandon what is true, but attempts to more deeply understand it so that it can apply more and more correctly, which I can't think of an example right now, but I'll just take you back to my example in the Trinity. We know that the teaching and theology, and Trinitarian theology is far more developed now than it was in 34 AD. The truth didn't change, but we understand it more deeply now. Understand? A lot of the theology surrounding the sacraments, we understand more deeply now than we did, and so on. So you will find that a revisiting of teaching, as I said, not to sound like a broken record, you will find a revisiting of teaching so that we better understand how it applies to modern scenarios that we either didn't see before or are so crazy now that we could never have possibly even imagined them before. You will see that. And that's a good thing. But this idea that, conservatives just want to... I just think the Pope really badly mischaracterizes us because he makes it look like we're just holding on to this for the sake of holding on to it. We just want to hold on to it. We don't care what you think. What kind of insecure prisses are we? Right? We just want to hold on to it because we want to hold on to it. But what the Holy Father is saying though it's broad sweeping and does not apply to everyone. It does not apply to all conservatives in the church. It is broad sweeping. But what he's saying that is true is indeed true, that there are conservatives who cannot see past their dogmatic boxes. They cannot see past their dogmatic boxes. Can we bless individuals, but not couples, in same-sex unions? Yes. You would run out of fingers and toes, not just your own, but those in your entire household, if you were to count how many conservatives were up in arms about that. Even though theologically, that is obvious. That is obvious. But people were up in arms about it because they cannot see past their dogmatic boxes. Here's another one. This one might be a little bit touchy. Can we give communion to the divorced and remarried? The simple answer is no, but there's never a simple answer. I think people are accustomed to getting simple answers, but really, look, a car appears to work simply until you open up the hood and you get a look at the engine, how it works, what composes it. And then on top of the engine, you also look at the transmission. Well, now, once you explore all these pieces, segments, components, and machinery, a car stops looking so simple, doesn't it? Catholicism is not so simple. The truth is simple, and yet it's complex. We, on the consumer's side of it, right, if we think of ourselves, Catholics, as consumers, we receive the faith and we put it to action or put it to use if we're a consumer, right? We're only given the simple stuff because that's all that we need. But simplicity is not what went into that. Complexity went into that. Can the divorced or remarried receive communion? No. Well, okay, that's a simple answer, but there is a complexity behind that. And today, I'm not making a claim, by the way. I am not making a claim. I'm just treating the theology. Today, there may be situations and scenarios where someone who is divorced and remarried may be admitted to communion. Not based on the simple answer, but based on the complexities behind the simple answer. Who can and cannot receive communion, why being divorced is wrong and against the teachings of Jesus, what divorce is, what annulment is, modern situations where people find their lives, moral theology, culpability, and whatnot. Highly complex. It's much more complex than a yes or a no. If you're asking me personally, can anyone in any situation, in any scenario, who's divorced and remarried be admitted to communion? I have no idea. I don't know. I really don't know. I would say 1 in a million chance, probably somebody can, licitly, probably, but I really don't know. I lean more on the side of the simple, no, they cannot. I think it's possible that someone who's divorced and remarried can be in a situation where they might be licitly admitted to Holy Communion. I can't imagine such a scenario, but knowing some of the complexities that go behind the teaching, I can see someone in a modern situation fitting that situation. I'm not saying, yes, everyone who's divorced or remarried should receive. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying they shouldn't. I leave it to the church to decide. I'm only sharing my personal opinion with you. I think the simple answer in almost every case is no, they cannot receive communion. Knowing the complexities of the teaching, the moral theology behind it, and so on, knowing the complexities of people's lived experiences and so forth, I think, yes, today there probably are cases where there is a person in such a situation who can probably licitly be admitted to Holy Communion. But I'm not making a claim. I leave it to the church. The point I'm trying to make with this long, drawn-out explanation is this. Church teaching is complex. And there are people who hold on to it because it's easier to hold on to something that's simple to understand. But it's much more complex than what it appears. And there are people who will hold on to it and they will not look past their dogmatic boxes. Even if a failure to look beyond their dogmatic boxes has the potential to abandon a soul to hell. Are we really so willing to abandon them? We cannot be locked into our dogmatic boxes like a coffin. We have to learn to see beyond them. Not in violation of truth, in total fidelity to truth, but with a deepening understanding of what the truth is. A deepening understanding of what the truth is. So what the Holy Father says is correct. Where he errs, though, is that he makes all conservatives fit that bill. He makes it seem like all conservatives are that. Let's go back to it.
You used an adjective, conservative. That is, conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
True and false. How can something be true and false at the same time? You just listen to it. So I don't like that he characterized all conservatives this way. I don't like how he makes conservatives. He always makes conservatives look like the biggest tools and the worst possible a-holes imaginable. And that really bugs me. Listen, there are some real tools and a-holes on the right. Believe me, I have encounters with them on social media all the time. And I have for many, many years, decades, literally decades. So I know they're out there. They're out there on the left too. Why doesn't he ever beat up on those? Why does he have to beat up on the radical the radical conservatives, not the ordinary conservatives, but the radical ones, the ones who are extreme right? Why, when he beats up on them, which I still think he should not do, but when he does, why does he throw all conservatives in that basket? And why doesn't he do that to anybody on the left? Because believe me, there are figures and character types on the left even more deserving of a whooping like that, like what he gave conservatives in that 60 Minutes segment. Don't judge the whole interview based on that segment, and don't judge the Holy Father based on that segment. He's a very smart guy. He's just a terrible, terrible communicator. Okay, so that's going to about do it. Oh, my goodness, that was like 30 minutes. Holy cow. Let's get the hell out of here. Play the music, Sam. This has been a special, I guess it's a special episode, and might as well call it a special episode. Damn it, it's 35 minutes almost of the Catholic Experience. Thank you for joining me on Locals. If you are lucky enough to be catching this on my podcast catalog, listening to it everywhere that podcasts are found, I thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to the podcast. For God's sake, please join me on Locals. I'm trying to get to 50. Folks, I'm trying to get to 50 members. Just join me on Locals. What the hell are you doing? It's free. What's the matter with you? And okay, back to the music. Join me on Locals if you're not already doing so. Follow me on Twitter at ForTheQueenBVM. Follow me on Facebook at Catholic Adventurer. Signing out of here. May God be with you all. Bye-bye.